time. Hello, and welcome to Into the Liminal Abyss. I am your podcast show host, Shetan Noir, and on today's show, I am talking to Courtney Block. And welcome to the show, Courtney.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, I always start out this question with all of my guests, so please tell us a little bit more about your background and um, what brought you and got you interested into the paranormal.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, to start off, I am a librarian, currently at a university in southern Indiana. Started my library career in public libraries. Um, so that's sort of professionally who I am.
Which is
I
awesome
got involved
because
in the
libraries
paranormal
are awesome.
from a very early age. I've always been interested in it. My mom has always been interested in it as well. So I think that growing up and watching what she would watch or seeing what she's reading kind of sparked that in me. So from a very early age, I was always interested and would seek out, books on the paranormal, on all different subsets of the paranormal, and especially cryptozoology, which is what led me to find you on a post that you made on a cryptozoology Facebook group. And also, recently, I have found a way to combine my professional and personal lives, and just finished a book with Roman and Littlefield that we're hoping will be out in July, but we'll see with what's going on in the world. But that's a bit about me.
So now your background as a librarian is awesome because I know that when I'm doing research on a book, for writing purposes or articles, my favorite place to start out is the library because you don't have to go buy a gazillion books. You can often start at your library, and there's so many cool services now that the libraries offer. It really does help, especially if you're not wanting to buy a whole book. Getting it from the library and being able to read it and take notes is wonderful. So I'm always so thankful that we have the library services.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so glad that you said that. Also, something about me is that I could talk about libraries until the sun goes down. But your point is such a good one because there are so many resources and wonderful books on a whole variety of paranormal topics that people can get through their local libraries, and they don't have to feel like it's that access is restricted or that these things cost a lot of money. You can certainly buy books if you want them, by all means, but getting them for your library is always an option. And I know right now it might be a little difficult to physically get your hands on a copy of those books, but
Now,
another, yeah.
does your library have I believe it's called Hoopla, which is an online service where you can download to because I download them and read them on my Kindle Fire. Um, but I know up here the public library system has it's a system called Hoopla, and you have access to books, videos, music. You do only get it for I think it's 10 days, but that's usually enough time to watch a video or read through a book. And so that, if you have your library card, I know that's how you access it.
Yes, we do have services like that here in southern Indiana as well. A lot of the libraries down here also have Hoopla, and they also have Overdrive,
Okay.
or yeah, Libby, as it is sometimes called in its latest iteration, I think. But yeah, you can get ebooks and e-audio. Um, I think that sometimes people forget, that audiobooks, it's just a different form of reading.
Right.
Um, but yeah, we do have access, and especially right now, taking advantage of those services. A lot of libraries down here um, are still available to help you set that up, like via email. They'll get you set up and going, and you can download materials. And a lot of libraries, what they're doing right now is upping the limit of what you can borrow, because they understand this is kind of a weird time that we're living
Yes.
in. So they're expanding. Let's say previously you could only get 5 ebooks. Now you can get 10.
Right. And that's wonderful. A wonderful service that's being offered right now. So now, um, you're a librarian, and we've talked about the library stuff, but what I really want to talk about is you just mentioned you have your own book. So can you tell us more about your book and the title of it and what the subject content is?
Yes. I always joke with people that this has been a terrifying process, writing a book. Um, and this is actually the first time that I'm talking publicly about the book. Um, so it is called Researching the Paranormal. And the subtitle is How to Find Reliable Information on Cryptozoology, Near-Death Experiences, Parapsychology, and more. And like I said, it's through the publisher Roman and Littlefield. And what got me interested in pursuing this, 2 Decembers ago, I saw a call for proposals come through a library listserv from Roman and Littlefield, and they were like, hey, we're looking for some ideas on our next round of research guide books, and if you have an idea, send it to us, and we'll, see where it goes. And I was just, I remember that day, I was just kind of like, oh, yeah, I think this would be so cool to do a paranormal research guidebook, but I'm going to send my idea to these people, and they're probably just going to be like, whatever, you're a weirdo, but I was like, oh, I'm going to do it anyways, let's just have some fun. And so I sent it with like already convinced that I would just get an email back that was like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Um, but they actually were like, oh, the paranormal? Tell us more. And then I was like, oh, what have I done?
Well, actually,
Oh,
there is a huge interest in the paranormal, and I thought I my thoughts were the exact same as yours because I do presentations at libraries. But I thought, what if I came up with a 4-week course and I offered it at local community colleges? And so I sent out probably about 10 different emails to different local community colleges, and I actually had several responses. So I picked 2 of them, and now I did teach my course in February, and it was very well received. Unfortunately, my second session of courses was supposed to start last week, and as we all know, everything got shut down with all the colleges and schools. So we're looking at
yeah.
next fall to start teaching it. But my thoughts were exactly what you were thinking. Is nobody is I'm going to offer it and write up the courses and see what the interest is. And I was actually very surprised at the response back that there was a huge interest, and it just snowballed from there.
That is so good to hear. And I think that it represents, I hope so much that it represents that we are on the cusp of having these paranormal discussions become more and more part of accepted mainstream intellectual and academic inquiry. And I think that's why I was kind of nervous about it, is that my proposal was, I'm going to write this book that is basically shows the long history of, academic and scientific inquiry into the paranormal, followed with a huge bibliography, a huge annotated bibliography of resources that are out there that take a bit more of a critical stance, not like critical as in negative, but just like through a bit more of a scientific exploration, so that people understand, like, hey, there are, it's not just for, funsies and campfire stories. Like,
Right.
this thing is like a real, there are real inquiries out there.
And your book sounds exactly like something I would write or want to read, because I jokingly tell people when I'm talking about what I do, as a presenter and an author and a podcaster. You know, when you set out to find information about the paranormal, cryptozoology, you think that that's just the hat that you're going to wear, but along the way you realize, nope, you have to become a detective. Forensic science starts playing in. You have to be able to be a researcher, and you have to be willing to look at all these different areas of information. And I like it when people come from it from not a pure scientific, test tubes and chemicals and stuff like that, analysis. But when people are actually doing the investigative work and the research into it and finding, the information.
Yes, I'm just like so glad that you have brought this up, and so very intrigued by the classes that you teach, and I just think it's wonderful. I like I said, I hope that it illustrates that we are able to begin having these conversations that are met with open-mindedness, whereas even still today, especially in academia, there can be, very loud voices that say, this is not a topic that we should be talking about here. This is, I manage my library's social media, and I do like these throwback Thursdays where I dig into the archives, and I found an article when Dr. Jeff Meldrum came to my university and did a talk, and
Oh,
I was
he's
like,
awesome.
"Oh, right." I
I've
mean,
talked to Dr.
oh my
Meldrum
gosh,
several times, and I interview him, and I'm always just so, um, I'm interviewing him, but I want to be the listener too, because just the stuff he talks about is just so phenomenal and so interesting.
yes. Oh my gosh, he's a wonderful presenter. I mean, I found this article and I thought, this is wonderful for Throwback Thursday, and I posted it, and we did get, a comment that was kind of like, this is embarrassing. As a university, we shouldn't have, and I was like, oh, that stings. I mean, that sentiment is still very much alive in academia, and I also wanted to write my book to essentially, out myself as a believer and supporter in this paranormal world that we live in, because I think I get so discouraged when students come up to the reference desk and they are often apologetic when they tell you that they're interested in researching, any subtopic of the paranormal. They actually apologize for that. And I'm just like, wait a minute, why are you apologizing? You have a genuine curiosity. You're figuring out how to navigate it. There's nothing embarrassing about that. Um, and so part of my goal and motivation of the book is to show people that, there are those of us in academia who are open to this and who support this, and it's okay to ask these questions, and we shouldn't be afraid of being ridiculed just because it doesn't fit within a materialistic dogma that still dominates academia.
Right. And honestly, I've had this mindset for a while now that it's to me it's normal if somebody has had a paranormal or a UFO experience, or has a sighting of a cryptozoological creature. To me, that's normal now. What's abnormal is if you haven't. and
Right.
and to me it's like, people can naysay it as much as they want, but I can guarantee the first time they have something weird happen to them or see something that they can't explain, suddenly they're a believer and they want to talk to everybody and get everybody's input. And it's like, to me, that is normal. Having, a paranormal uh, experience, seeing things that you can't explain. To me, that's normal. And I think, if people really, paid attention to what goes around them and took notice of what goes on, they would realize that they are just like everybody else. Everybody, has had some type of paranormal encounter in their life, and when they deny it, that to me that's abnormal. That's, they just need to raise their hand and said, "Yep, I've had that, happen," and instead of saying, "Oh no, that stuff, that's fake. That doesn't happen." There's so many experiences, and so many people have had encounters, sightings, that it can't be denied anymore.
Exactly. And I like to talk about how it's interesting that certain things that we don't really understand at all are accepted in mainstream science, but other things are not. So, for example, dreaming. We know that it happens because, it's been documented and people talk about it. And, millions and millions of people around the world talk about their dreams and record them. But we don't really know what dreams are or how they happen or why they happen necessarily. There are some theories, but I don't see how that's any different from the millions and millions of reports of people having a paranormal encounter, whether it's, hearing disembodied voices or seeing apparitions or UFO related or strange creatures. Like, we know that these things are happening, but that gets poo-pooed.
Right.
So it's kind of, I always like to sort of think about those things. And I think, it's funny that dreams, to me, that the act of dreaming is just paranormal as if, a ghost walked in front of my face right now. I mean, they're just as paranormal. One of these things, though, has just been embraced by mainstream science and the other hasn't.
Right. So now, have you had any experiences or encounters with either the paranormal or cryptid beasts like Bigfoot, Dogman? Have you had any encounters of your own?
In terms of cryptozoology, I wish that I had a story, but I unfortunately don't have any personal experiences with cryptozoology. Although I did go on a very fun and very wonderful Bigfoot hunt with, I think it was with that company, Ghost Hunt Weekends, maybe, in the hills of Kentucky, and it was so much fun. Um, but I didn't see or experience anything other than just the general camaraderie of some really cool people. Um, but in terms of a bit more of like the traditional type of hauntings and EVPs, I have had some experiences with that. A couple of years ago, I was with my mom, and it was just the two of us, and we were doing an EVP session in her kitchen because she had had some strange things happening at that house. And we were using, one of those old school recorders where you have to put, a cassette tape and
Yep,
push play.
those are old
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. And, it's what we had. And she had a fresh tape and she popped it in. And we're just kind of sitting there talking, um, not necessarily asking pointed questions anymore. We had done those and then we just started talking. And when we went to review it, there is clear as day, as if there is somebody right there next to us. You hear the sound of this child just humming.
Oh, wow.
It was like, I mean, it was one of those EVP, you didn't have to lean in real close and like trick your ear into hearing it. Like, it was like somebody was there, like they were kind of listening and just like a child does, when they're just off to the side playing and they hum. Um, and yeah, so there was that. That was a really cool experience. There was also an experience that I had with a group that I'm in down here in southern Indiana, which is the Institute for the Study of Religious and Anomalous Experience. And we had gone to Saddamsville in Cincinnati, which I don't think is open to the public anymore. Um, and part of our team was upstairs, and the other part of the team was downstairs monitoring the DVR. And the group of us that were upstairs, I distinctly saw this shadow, like a 4 foot tall shadow figure that just sort of like emanated on the wall. And just as I was saying, hey, does anyone else see this? Our colleagues at base camp, if you will, began shouting wildly. And they were like, you guys need to get down here right now. We need some help.
Uh-oh.
And we were like, yeah. And we were like, whoa, what is, and so we're like, oh my God. So we walked downstairs, and apparently they heard somebody just wailing on the front door, just like pounding on it. And they were concerned that, there was somebody, like literally some physical person out there trying to, break in or do something. And the thing that's interesting about it is that when my group was upstairs, we could hear our colleagues whispering, like in the kitchen. But none of us who were upstairs heard this pounding on the front door. And of course, we investigated because it's not really in the best neighborhood of Cincinnati, and or at least it wasn't a number of years ago. I don't know what it's like now, but the owners had told us you just need to be a little careful.
Right.
Just be a little aware of your surroundings, because there could be people walking around, and it's a bit of a notorious place. So people know about it, but that was a very interesting. I still don't really know how to reconcile that today.
Yeah, it's interesting how one group of people at a location can experience something and another group in just, another room won't experience it. So it's interesting how things will interact with people.
Yes, definitely. I think those are the two that sort of stand out in my mind. There are other um, paranormal encounters that I've had throughout the years, both personally and with the group that I belong to. And I've also had some very um, bizarre hypnagogic experiences. um, so stuff with the mind just fascinates me, and I think that's another reason that I'm so fascinated by this juxtaposition of dreaming and the paranormal, because if we we meaning like the scientific community put a nice tidy little label on the hypnagogic experience, even though we have really no clue why or how those things happen. um, I don't understand how a hypnagogic experience is any different than um, an experience that someone has when they're fully awake and walking through a building.
And the interesting thing about the paranormal is that uh, they, depending on what kind of haunting it is, you can experience it day or night, and sometimes it will come to you in a dreamlike, like state, depending on what type of paranormal entity that you're dealing with. So it's, some people do have encounters, and they say, they felt like they were in a dream, but they were awake, and they just, it takes them a while to process what they've experienced, and in order for them to deal with it. So it's interesting how the mind interprets things, and especially when you add in the paranormal, it adds in that one more element of um, I don't want to say confusion, but of what your mind's going to interpret what's going on.
Definitely. And I think that that's what um, that's what makes some of the research that I did for this book so interesting. Is, for example, there's a number of UFO ufology books that I reference in the book, and the authors have um, grappled with this question of how do we study something that one person might have experienced it this way and another person experienced it this way. And there are these really creative, intelligent minds out there that are developing and have developed these questionnaires and forms, and tried to make them as um, sort of statistically significant as possible to sort of eliminate, some of the subjectivity, or perhaps even like hallucinations or misidentification. I think in a lot of times um, is what that could be, but it's just really fascinating to see people critically grapple with this question and come up with tests or interviews that try to address that very issue of the paranormal.
Yeah, because you can have five people experience the same situation at the same time and in the same location, but each one of them might interpret it differently and give you a completely different story of what their experience was compared to everybody else, which is why it's when I like to talk to witnesses, I like to separate them, and like any police officer would, separate everybody and, get each and every individual person's story so that nobody's kind of piggybacking off of anybody else, but you're getting what their interpretations were and what their experience was.
Exactly. Yeah, and that those are some of the techniques that I guess I was kind of getting at is seeing these very sort of clinical approaches and measures being applied to the paranormal is very cool. Um, and throughout the book too, though, I kind of remind people that you know, um, you don't have to just, critically and scientifically engage with the paranormal. Like you can still engage with it in your own sort of personal ways or, um, it's something that can be like both very fun, um, to engage in whatever manner you choose, but it's also something that you can critically engage with and investigate. So, as much as I talk about the long history of scientific inquiry into the paranormal, I try not to lose uh, the point that it's also it can very much be a personal inquiry as well, and it can be just as significant and meaningful without any sort of scientific dogma behind it.
Oh yeah, I mean each person will take what they want from an investigation, but for me, it's the curiosity factor of, there's been historical reports that this place is haunted by such and such ghost, or this happens, at this time of day, or I like the historical stories of what people have encountered, and then there's the curiosity factor of, okay, is it going to happen? And I also do paranormal travel writing, which I go to locations that have either paranormal history or they're just weird, places to visit. And I take pictures and I document my experience there. But for somebody else, it might be, okay, they're going in strictly just to find, and get EVP, or, they set up their cameras and they want to get pictures. And for another person, they might have more psychic ability and they want to communicate, psychically with the spirits. So each person kind of, you go into an investigation with whatever it is you're looking to find. And for some people, that's data and, EVPs and photography. For other people, it's just, okay, I want to see, I just want to sit here and see what happens. See if I just sit here, if something happens and I don't have to say anything, the spirits know I'm here and they just do their thing. So it's really, nobody is going to be exactly the same with what they're looking for. When you go on to a paranormal investigation or Bigfooting or anything like that, but it's interesting to see what each person's takeaway is from the encounter and the experience.
Definitely. And you bring up such another wonderful point here is that, paranormal inquiry takes so many different forms, and there's no one right way of doing that. And I think sometimes, popular television makes it, look like there is perhaps a method. And there's certainly nothing wrong with paranormal television because I am a fan just as much as the next person. But, and some of these shows get very creative and outside the box, and that's been wonderful to see lately. But also in the book, I try to remind people, there's no script for this. There's no right or wrong way necessarily to engage with the paranormal, as long as it feels right to you. And if you want to perhaps, be a little more uh, critical about it, just document. Just make
Right,
sure you
right.
document everything that you've done and how you've done it, and see what happens.
And
So,
and
yeah.
you don't need like all these fancy new gadgets that I see people coming out with at shows. You can go in and into a paranormal location that has a history of hauntings and just with your cell phone.
Yeah.
Most cell phones have an app on it for easy voice recording or a voice recorder. Have that on. Your cell phone comes with a camera and a video. Pretty much all you need for as an investigator is right there on your cell phone. But I see people, they have these balls that light up and REM pods and even like children's toys that the ghost children can interact with. And that's all cool. It's really interesting to watch on TV. But as the individual person going in to document paranormal encounters, pretty much all you need is your cell phone and an open mind.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. I'm so glad you said that, the open mind, because I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think that sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for being the potential paranormal conduit that I think we're all capable of being. Um, and for the past several years, I've been getting more and more into meditation, and um, some of the strangest experiences I've encountered during meditation. And, you know, all I have literally is just myself at that moment.
Right.
This intense focus. I remember, I think I would compare them to hypnagogic episodes, because what I think is happening is you're putting yourself in a liminal state. And I talk about liminality at the beginning of my book, but I think there really is something about, there's like something about the liminal state that
Which is the name of
is
my
so,
podcast, by the way, Into the
yes,
Liminal Abyss. So,
yes, exactly, right? So, it's so perfect for this, discussion, but there's, I think, something so at the heart of the paranormal, about liminality, and you're putting yourself like in this border state where you have one foot in and one foot out.
hmm.
And I think that when people, realize that we are just as mystical and paranormal as, you know, that haunted building down the road, um, that they will see that, we're really not so disconnected from it as we might think we are.
And really, I mean, there's a connection with almost everyone in existence today and in the past history. It's hard to find um, any situation where you're not connected to it through either a person or an event or some coincidence that happens. And it's really interesting how things play out like that.
Yes. And getting back to something that you kind of referenced earlier, because, we all know somebody that has experienced something, or us ourselves have experienced something, it's so important to reduce the stigma surrounding that, because, like you got at earlier, especially for people who are adamantly against the paranormal, um, when they do encounter something, it can be almost traumatic,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it shakes their convictions so hard. And, for those people especially, it's important that they feel like they can talk about these things and that there won't be, people laughing at them or thinking that they're crazy or, any number of other stereotypes surrounding the paranormal.
Exactly. And it's, to me, it's the people that you surround yourself with and that you communicate with. Now, for me, I talk to lots of paranormal investigators, cryptid, investigators, UFO, investigators. So to me, it's all normal. But I occasionally come across the person who says, "Oh, that stuff's phooey. I don't believe in that stuff." And it's like, well, that's your opinion, but
Right.
I've lived on this earth long enough. I've had enough experiences that I know that there's something else out there, and to deny it is to, if you're going to deny it, then how can you believe in anything other than, uh, what you can experience, with touching, feeling, hearing, smelling, tasting. If you're going to believe, then you're going to believe.
Right, right. And here's where we enter into this juxtaposition of, paranormal and, faith-based, religious systems. I mean, I don't really see a difference between somebody telling me that, they believe in, God or, this or that higher power, and they try to follow the doctrines of, laid out by whatever religious system. I mean, I don't, people don't get, I mean, sometimes they get, made fun of. There's always somebody out there critiquing people for anything, but
Right.
that is so embedded into our cultural and societal fabric. Religion is, and it's again one of those juxtapositions that I think is so funny, that people would, so readily accept that this person over here believes in, angels or, a higher power, but they're going to look with scorn upon the person who believes in, ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot. And it's like, I find it hard to see the difference.
It,
Um,
my thoughts exactly. How can you believe in one thing and deny the existence of something else when you have no more proof of what you believe in than what the other person can prove or disprove? So, to me, you're kind of in the same boat, but you're just rocking it from side to side. Um, you know,
right. Yeah, and I think that that this is not me saying that the paranormal is a religion or is just faith based, because I we know if you dig into the history of paranormal research that these things have been scientifically investigated, and there have been some very interesting things that people discover. So it's one of the paranormal. I think what I'm trying to say is it's one of those things that can be both a very sort of spirituality based path that people take. It could also be a scientific path for people, and these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think sometimes, especially in our Western world, we think that these things are two totally separate things, and that you can't be, for example, somebody, in academia who also, harbors a belief in Bigfoot.
exactly. I mean, it's not an all inclusive, club or membership. If you want to believe, then it's your um, it's your acceptance of it, and you just, if you want to believe, then you're welcome to believe, and if people want to deny it, then that's on them. I mean, I stopped trying to convince people long ago because I realized that you can give them every piece of evidence that's available, and they will still turn up their nose and put their hands over their ears and say, I don't want to hear it, I don't believe in it, and that's fine. But when they have that
Yeah.
experience that they cannot explain, then that's when they're suddenly, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me, and I know that you believe in this stuff, so let me tell you my story. And it's like, okay, I'll listen. And then it's like, so now that you're a believer, uh, what do you think? And so it's interesting how people's mindsets change when they have that one encounter that they can't explain, and it just bothers them.
Right, right. And I think, I try to make it very clear in my book, that I'm not trying to convince anyone of, the existence or non-existence, of any of the things. I'm just laying a path for you to find these resources and learn about these people that have been scientifically investigating and interacting with various paranormal phenomena for years. And, there's plenty of stuff, plenty of topics that I don't know anything about, but once I perhaps engaged with it with an open mind, maybe I would think differently. And so there's a quote here that I was looking at that I was reminded of during our conversation from Matt Cardin in his chapter or essay titled Ghosts, Spirits, and Psychics. And he says here that the paranormal signifies all kinds of speculative possibilities and potential. It's phenomena that are both objective and subjective in nature. And he said he's referencing Jeffrey Kripal here. He says, in other words, Kripal approaches the paranormal as a realm of living narrative, where the key to understanding is not measurement, but meaning.
And that is a very well thought out statement.
I really like this statement by, Matt Cardin, and I liked how he says here, the key to understanding is not measurement, but meaning. And I really like that because I think it exemplifies that, the paranormal can be and is for a lot of people these very meaningful experiences that almost, get close to a sort of spirituality or personal ethos, if you will. And he reminds us here, that it's okay to investigate it critically and scientifically, of course, but to not lose the wonder that's associated with all of it, because it's pretty fantastic to step back and ask yourself what it all means.
And I agree with that completely. So now we're coming up on, we only have a few minutes left. So could you tell us the name of the book, of your book again, and the publisher, and is it going to be available in like Barnes and Noble, or is it just Amazon?
Yeah, so the publisher is Roman and Littlefield, and we are hoping for a July publication date. Of course, I'm not really sure what all of the things going on in the world right now might mean for that.
Right.
Yeah, but we are shooting for a July publication. I'm still working on finalizing the index of it right now. But the full title is Researching the Paranormal, How to Find Reliable Information About Parapsychology, Ghosts, Astrology, Cryptozoology, Near-Death Experiences, and more. That's a bit of a mouthful, but that's the subtitle there. So the main title is just researching the paranormal, and the first half of it is an overview of what I even mean when I use the word paranormal. So I talk about, as you could see from the subtitle, I talk about a whole bunch of different subsets of the paranormal and provide a bit of a historical overview of how each of those has been investigated throughout the years by these really amazing, creative, intellectual figures. And then I launch into the second half of the book, which is a big, it might even be closer to 2/3 of the book, just a big annotated bibliography of books, journals, journal articles, encyclopedias, dictionaries, handbooks, professional organizations that can all point people to learning more about these things.
It sounds like a wonderful book, and I cannot wait to read it and just have it in my collection because I have a feeling it's going to be a very good book to work from. So I want to thank you again for coming on the show today, and everyone go out and hopefully this book comes out in July and everybody can get a copy of it. And I look forward to reading it.
Thank you. That means so much. Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful discussion.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for being on the show again.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.